Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dallas International Festival. Film Festival. My name is Peter Simic. I am the arts editor with D Magazine, and this is the front row interview stage. We've been up here for every night since the beginning of the fest, and this is our last night, and it's a great way to end it because we have the great Peter Weller and Angie Bolling from ROBOCOP, of course. And ROBOCOP is going to be playing on Saturday night, and it's a 25th anniversary reunion. So thank you guys so much for joining us. And we have another little guest up here. Peter, do you want to tell us who?
This is Theodore Mark Gerald Francesco Weller. 4 names, 1 kid. 7 months old. And first and only kid so far. And first and only wife forever there. Sherry. But I want to say hi to Angie, because Angie's my great.
Hi, how y'all doing? I'm the the flashback wife of Mrs. RoboCop, so, and I will always be forever known as that. So, we're glad to be here, and glad y'all could be here too. Thanks for coming.
Well, we're so happy to have Mr. and Mrs. RoboCop on stage, and I wanted to start kind of looking back.
Mr. and Mrs. Murphy.
Well, actually, maybe that's a good part to start. I heard a story that when you were on set, you were so sort of in the method in this role that you were making everyone refer to you as RoboCop, even off camera.
No. When I was in that costume, everyone referred to me as Robo. Yeah, that's true. What am I saying no for? Yes, that's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. But there was a whole sort of caged, kind of contained, remarkable zeitgeist going on when you had that costume on, and 4 or 5 people, including a 7-month-old, trying to steal a microphone from you, upstaged always. But 4 or 5 people working on you constantly, like a Formula One team, like a racing team, and subsequently it just dissuaded the usual sort of, hey, Peter, how you doing? Because once I was in that, 6 months of mime and voice training and the whole thing, and then once you had that thing on, you didn't want to go like, hey, Peter, you want to play a round of golf, So, yeah.
Tell them how hot it got in there.
Yeah, it was also, it was one of the most dreadful summers of Dallas, too. It was 110 degrees usually outside, and inside was 120 degrees, so. And the suit, yeah.
And then you're wearing the suit, which is tons of pounds. Well, I mean, how did the role jump out to you? Because you're starting in a situation where you're living in New York, you're members of the Actors Studio, and you get this role offer that is come to Dallas in the middle of the summer and wear this crazy suit. And it's already been offered or considered for someone like Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I think a lot of actors, they see, I'm going to act as a robot. That almost sounds like I'm not going to act for a while. What about the role said, this is something I can really take somewhere?
Well, the telling distinction was, first of all, Paul Verhoeven, because I'd seen all of his movies, and I knew that Paul Verhoeven was connected to it. It had something to do with a opera, some world canvas of something important, and some personal tragic comedy, because that's all he's interested in. He's not really interested in soap opera or, gizmos or whatever. He's really interested in personal stories set against the backdrop of horror. And so I knew it would be good just because he was involved. But you want to come and get Teddy, honey? Let's get Sherry. Come on up. Come up and say hello to Angie. Did you ever meet Angie Bolling?
We just met.
Did you meet Peter of D Mag? Okay. There's. Yeah. All right. There goes the boots.
It's got to have the boots.
And that was that. It was Verhoeven. I knew there was be something fascinating about it. And I read it. Indeed, it was funny and it was sad and it was mythic. And more importantly, though, it had to do with it's prescient. It's actually way ahead of its time, because I was interviewed about it 3 or 4 years ago by a lot of third world country media people who see it as a anthropological. You could look at it in terms of all of the third world demonstrations against the WTO. The privatization of the business of the world, such as that, the personal identity is stolen, and that's remarkable in a day like today. That's 26 years ago, and that's a problem that's going on now. In the face of the remarkable money and galvanized collective thrust of industrial nations and who's suffering of the third world, and essentially the rape, looting, and pillaging of the third world. There you have it metaphorically in RoboCop. That's not what you wanted to ask me, though, was it? You wanted to ask me how much the suit weighed. I know.
Well, and to continue with that a little bit, I mean, when you were making the movie at that time, 25 years ago, since we are looking back, I mean, was there a sense of that was, that it was going to have this resonance or have that kind of resonance over a long period of time?
No. Look at something like, okay, corporations privatize the police department such as that the illicit contraband that they also own, will be passed unnoticed. This is so. It's such an unwieldy plot. Plot by the alien universe called corporate world that nobody thought about. I only took the part because it was the great transformation of a man who had his identity taken away from him. And subsequently, it's a story of personal resurrection. I didn't see this social backdrop. As a matter of fact, I didn't even thought about it until I was accosted by 1 week of publicity in Warner Brothers offices in London about this particular resonance that it has with the theft of identity. And I was like dumbstruck. I didn't have any answers for anybody. I had to go do my homework very quickly. So I wouldn't look like a bludgeoning orange juice head idiot from Malibu actor, who just walked off the boat, has nothing to say, like most of them do. And I include myself in that group. So.
Well, Angie, how did you get involved in the production? I mean, it was you were here
Take it away,
locally.
Thank you, Peter.
All right.
Well, I'm a local actress in Dallas, and I'm celebrating my 30th year with the Kim Dawson Agency. And I went in for the audition. That's right. That's right. But, I just do a lot of work here as a local actress, commercials and film and voiceover. And I was called in for this audition, and I think that they had someone in place to play your wife. The rumor I heard was they had, I don't know, they never told me, but they said someone was here and she sat around for a while and had to go back to L.A., and so they had a casting. That's what I heard, but I didn't hear it from Paul Verhoeven, so I don't know if it's true.
I never heard that at all. And I thought I heard all of them.
No, you had that helmet on.
Or maybe I had that helmet on. I couldn't understand. Yeah. You're right. But I never heard that one.
Yeah, well, that's about, I just got called in, and I was lucky enough to get the part. And it was a little bit of an unusual audition because I had to look right into the camera and walk right up to the camera and tell the camera I loved it and all of that. And, so it was great. And, got to do the second movie and the third movie, which you didn't do.
No, I didn't do the third
that.
one. I didn't even want to do the second one, but they offered me a paycheck I couldn't refuse, and subsequently I bought a house. But we had real scenes together in the second one, yeah. But I was sort of, Frank Miller, a great writer, and Irv Kershner, bless his heart, in the second one. But when I read the second one, I knew it didn't have a third act. It didn't have a third. Not to denigrate anything you've done, but it was a great plot, but it didn't have a third act. Whereas the first one is classic because the third act is the thing that makes all great third acts of all great movies, and maybe is what makes the movie alive to this day is that third act. Yeah. No, but when they offered me a third one, I was off. I was going taxi, but so just like Dean Martin said about Jerry Lewis, I was happy to join it, and I was happy to leave it. So.
Well, one of the stories of
Can somebody get me a double espresso with a little shot? Maybe go to Starbucks, get me not you, honey, but somebody can. Really, a double shot in a small non-fat latte. Anyone out there, there's major money in it for you. Double shot, small, non-fat latte. I see no one going.
There's
now,
a beer.
Honey, I don't do alcohol, cigarettes, drugs, or men, and I don't blame anybody who does. But
Well, one of the stories of you on set is being in that suit. That's sort of one of the big dramas of making this film. And part of that was you had a movement coach and who had a mime
Brilliant
trainer.
guy. Just talked to him yesterday.
Yeah. Well, what made you think that? Well, I need to enlist someone with mime training for this role. And what was that sort of process like?
Well, I talked to Verhoeven when I was hired and said, Verhoeven had no idea. He has sort of an idea about how the movement should be, but I said, look, it's really going to take some sort of stylized movement. He agreed, so they just left me on my own. Him and Mike Medavoy left me on my own to find my own guy. I'd taken a lot of dance, a lot of ballet, a lot of jazz, and a modicum of mime as a young actor, but I interviewed a lot of pantomimes, and they were really good teachers at pantomime, but I needed something else. So Moni Yakin, who's head of the movement department and is a great mime, but he's also into dance and theater and a lot of other things. I met him at Juilliard, and I forget how he got his name, but he said, this is not really just mime. This is going to be something else. This is sort of a theatrical, this is an operatic thing behind it, and subsequently went with him, and he's a dear friend to this day.
Well, Angie, what was you've been in Dallas for 30 years acting? I mean, what was a lot of looking back? A lot of people have a nostalgia for that period of time when there was a lot of movie production
Right,
stuff going
back
on.
in the 80s. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So
Uh-huh.
how does that compare today to where we are and sort of how have things?
Well, it's really different. It's just the community's different. There are more independent films that are made now. The commercials are a little different now. Also, there's so much I could say about it. My head's kind of spinning with all the everything. I don't really know where to begin. But there used to be a lot more of a community as far as the film business, as far as film and commercial and industrial work. You could work on a film. You might do 1 or 2 days, and you'd work with the same crew that you might work on the next week on a commercial. And so you would see the same people a lot. And it was kind of like a big family, and that's really changed. That's what I've noticed the most, and that's what I miss. I still see some of the old people, but it's not as much, and things are kind of spread out. And a lot of new young people have come in, of course, which is great. More independent films, but it's just in those ways, I think. It's a community shift, I think.
Was that sort of the environment for ROBOCOP? Was there a lot of that sort of same community that was moving around from project to project?
Yes, when I went to work on ROBOCOP, I already knew a lot of the crew members. And, of course, a lot of people came in from L.A. and New York, but the core crew were from Dallas. And they were a lot of the guys that I'd worked on in commercials and industrials and everything else I've been working on for the few years I had been here before that. So it really made it a lot of fun. And but I always felt sorry for Peter because he was just so hot in that suit. I don't know how he did it.
Well, what was he like
great.
on set? I mean,
Well,
being
he was
in
great.
that suit
We weren't around each other a lot on that first movie because I was, just the flashback wife. So we just had a few little scenes together. But he was great. He was always nice to me. I just felt sorry for him because he was just, he had he had the towel stuck in, Remember having all that and I think he was just, I just think he felt miserable most of the time, didn't you?
I didn't feel miserable, really, because the discipline of the thing was like I was on macrobiotic diet and practicing for the New York Marathon and really had I was up at 4 or 5 in the morning every day running. So by that time, I was a stoic. I was a full-fledged stoic. It was, they had air conditioning ducts. Remember, they'd bring in those air conditioning, the industrial air conditioning ducts to cool me down at a distance because if I got too cold, I'd get pneumonia. But yeah.
Well, in addition to the suit itself, I mean, what kind of preparation did you put into sort of the role and having to sort of work with the suit because it's covering up so much of your body, and how do you take that into
I never
account?
thought for a second that I would be penalized in any way visually by being inside that suit. I always figured that if I had something going on with this character that somebody'd get what I was saying. So 6 months with Moni, the suit had its particular dilemma according to the movement. We adjusted the movement, slowed down the movement, made it much more articulated to fit the suit. And by the time we were off and running with the suit, I was the guy. I got to say, I got so heady about it that, and I was training for the New York Marathon that Verhoeven let me out at the last week in Pittsburgh to go run in New York. But in Dallas, we would wrap on a Friday night. The next day, I'd sleep late. I'd go dancing. I'd usually go dancing. I just remember going dancing a lot. I'd go to discotheques and clubs and so forth and dance. And then on Sunday, I had these long runs, and I was rather depressed. And I was really depressed when that movie wrapped, because if you get in a groove like that, a particular groove of that kind of physical discipline, and then all of a sudden it's over, and you have no way to channel or no place to channel, that's sort of that particular force, is a dynamic, a personal energy, get bummed out. The only option is to, I don't know what, go to Paris or serious narcotics. Being that I was done with narcotics long before that movie, I went to Paris. I loved Paris. Yes, Paris. I went to Paris immediately. I went to Madrid and Paris, and then I was telling my lovely wife the other night, my wife just threw me a 65th birthday party, surprise birthday party, 2 months in advance. And that's the way to, if anybody wants to throw a surprise birthday party, do it 2 months in advance. They'll never know. They'll never know. They'll never suspect a thing. That's the way to do it. 320 people flown in from all over, including this town. But anyway, she brought in flamenco dancers. Oh, wow. Like the real deal flamenco. Because right after ROBOCOP, I was so nuts that I went to Spain and I spent 2 months following all the flamenco tours through all the pueblos blancos of the España Sud, through Andalusia and Cádiz and Cáceres and Sevilla, man. And that was the only way I wound down off that movie.
Has there been any other role that's had a similar?
Kelly, you had your minions, and I know you have many of them. Who's Miss Ruth?
There you go.
Where's Miss Ruth? That's a plot. Miss Ruth, you're so sweet. I love that blouse, too. Wow, she's elegant, Miss Ruth. All right, good. Now I'm loaded.
Well, you mentioned winding down from this role. Has there been any other similar roles that have taken that much to kind of wind down?
No, none, and there never will be. Naked Lunch was really really a book that I'd followed for a long time. As a matter of fact, I didn't do ROBOCOP 3 because I was going to do Naked Lunch. But Naked Lunch is a book I'd lived with for 40 years, and I was in a dastardly period of my life that Verhoeven said, this role seems very accessible to you. And I don't know if I could do either one of those roles now or would want to. I would want to ever go to that. Right now I'm having a very happy time. Very happy time. Yes, with my 7.5-month-old son who's like mini me. Or I'm mini him or something. I think I'm mini him is what the real deal is. And my beautiful wife. And, directing a lot of television and working with J.J. Abrams right now in Star Trek, and I don't know if somebody said, hey, put on a suit for 6 months and do mine for 6 months, go on macrobiotic diet, lose 40 pounds, and I'd say, I'd call a cab, I think. Yeah.
Is this a role for both of you guys or a movie that has followed you in any way that sort of has sort of been hard?
Yes, here we are.
Yeah.
Oh,
here we are in Dallas, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, well, it's fun. It's been fun for me because, being a local actress and not a celebrity and not just being a working actor in a small market. When I tell people I'm an actor, I'm like, well, I've never seen you in anything. What have you done? Because I know I've done a lot of stuff, but I'm a working actor in small parts. And I'll say, oh, have you ever heard of ROBOCOP? Oh, yeah. So it's been really good for me to give people a name recognition for that. So it's been fun for me it's more fun for people to know that than anything else. I guess people like to have a little celebrity in their lives or something, but it's fun. It's fun for me. Maybe not so much for Peter, but I don't know.
It's interesting you say that because Jack Nicholson, for instance, look at the realm, look at the context, the body of the corpus of that guy's work, And yet, kids seem today say, "Oh, the Joker! It's the Joker! It's the Joker!" And it's like, you get labeled for that. So you live with it. It's just great to be working. It's always great to be working. If you're surviving and you're working in the movies or theater, man, you've conquered it. So, like, there's a day, like everything, like even Humphrey Bogart. I doubt if it's true for Humphrey Bogart. He said, like, you're lucky if you make 3 movies that outlive you. You're really fortunate if you only make 1. And there is a time when they will forget you. And this particular day and age, in the internet and so forth, where I think Andy Warhol's 15 minutes of fame has been reduced to 30 seconds. I have to say, man, I'm finishing a PhD in Italian Renaissance art. I was in a PhD German class, and I was giving a report on a short story called "The Judgment and His the Judge and the Hangman and His Judge," and it was made into a film by Maximilian Schell, great Oscar-winning Maximilian Schell, Judgment at Nuremberg, starring Jacqueline Bisset, Robert Shaw, John Voight, and a great director, Martin Ritt, who directed some great movies, including Paul Newman's greatest film. I'm talking to 26 American kids, 28 years old. None of them have seen Robert Shaw movie. I have to say Jaws. Two kids have seen Jaws. 2 kids have seen Jaws. None of them heard of Jacqueline Bisset, one of the great beauties of all time. They only know John Voight because he's like Angelina Jolie's dad. And forget about Martin Ritt, because I then said he directed Paul Newman, and 1 guy in a class of 30 had ever seen a Paul Newman movie. 1 guy. So that's how fast. But that's how fast it goes. Yeah. It's a day and age of lickety-split info, man. So we're lucky to be working, man.
That's right. We are very lucky. But I think you're right. It's 30 seconds of fame, and that's about it. So.
Well, thanks, guys, so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. It was fun.
On that depressing note.
On that note.
Well,
right?
on a good note, because you live here, and I worked here, and I have many friends here, including my friend Jim Mahoney, who just brought us here, my wife and I here, formerly the Dallas Morning News, editor of photography, and a lot of buddies, and a lot of people in Fort Worth who are friends. My parents lived in Fort Worth. I went to school at North Texas, now University of North Texas. Why they made it University of North Texas? I love North Texas State. So Texas is my home, really, and let me just close with what a remarkable state it is. In fact, in face of the depressing economy, in fact, in face of all the pressures of living in a 21st century modern world, Texas shines, and I'm always happy to come back to Texas, man. So there.
Glad to have you back.
Texas. Well, thanks for coming back, Peter.
And all my high school buddies in San Antonio. Listen, we have a high school reunion like every year in San Antonio. And this party, how many people of San Antonio showed up? It's a good 10 or 12, right? Out of our 85 graduating class at Alamo Heights. So I love San Antonio, too. I'm going to give it to you, Angie, because you're the native Texan.
Yeah, right. I'm the native, right. Well, not really. I'm from Alabama, but yeah.
You're not a native? That's the first thing they ask you in Texas. I actually was smoking a cigar at the Grand Avenue in New York, and the owner comes over and says, "This is a guy from Texas." I look up, he says, he works for, I don't know, some corporation out of Houston. He goes, "You're from Texas?" "Yeah." Right out of his mouth. Next thing he asks, "You native?" I go,
It's
"No."
the real judge.
No, I moved here from Wisconsin after 4 weeks. And he just went like this. Oh. I want to say, listen, man, the Toltecs are the only natives here, asshole.
Well, what's the old saying? I wasn't born in Texas, but I got here as fast as I could. That's it. So we did. We got here as fast as we could.
Dan Jenkins was saying about Texas, right? Sitting in New York, how you find Texas. You go south, you smell it, and west, you step in it. I love Texas, though. And only Texans can tell that on themselves, Because New Yorkers ain't got that sense of humor, I'm sorry. And Los Angelinos got no sense of humor at all, so.
That's probably a more perfect way to end it then. Yeah, thanks.
brought to you in part by the film Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace. Welcome to another Leon Charney report. Over the years, Leon Charney has interviewed some of the most influential people in history. Today, we rebroadcast two interviews Leon Charney conducted with two of the most influential people in sports journalism, Dick Schaap and Bill Mazer. First, Leon Charney's interview with Dick Schaap.
I'm Leon Charney. I'm here with Dick Schaap. Everyone knows Dick Schaap, and he's written a book called Dick Schaap, flashing before my eyes, on Dick Schaap. And we need relaxation after the Middle East, and nobody better to share with than Dick Schaap. You are the only guy, which is fascinating, that votes both for the Heisman Trophy and for the Tony Awards.
I've always been journalistically schizophrenic.
Dick Schaap's life sounds highly improbable to me, but I'll take his word for it. Gene Shalett's quote on Dick's book. The most fascinating man you met in 50 years.
Ali. Nobody close to Ali. He's on the cover. I've known him for 41 years. If I walk down the street with him and the Queen of England and the Pope, they're going to say, who are those three people with Muhammad Ali?
You know why you're right? I represented Joe Louis. I took Joe Louis downstairs with me to the Marine Midland Building at 140 Broadway. I've represented prime ministers in my life, presidents. No one got the ovation of Joe Louis ever in the history, and that's why I know you're right about Ali.
And Ali, of course, was much more of an international figure than Louis. Because
Joe was loved because of that whole thing in Germany and Schmeling. By the way, I met Schmeling through Joe. They
still alive.
Friends. They became friends.
Yeah.
They became very good friends.
Now, Schmeling, I've been told, is a decent human being, an old decent human being.
He's a very old one. What happened with Ali? What was it? His charisma? Why is everybody fascinated by him?
I think the thing with him is that he is the personification of love. He walks into a room and he loves everybody, and 99% love him back. There's nothing hidden about it. He's never hidden anything about his life, his feelings, everything else. The best story I can tell you is about 3 or 4 months ago. I was emceeing a dinner for the ALS Foundation, Lou Gehrig's disease, and Ali was the guest of honor, was getting the major award that night. There was a young man in his late 30s or early 40s who had once been a boxer who now had ALS disease, which obviously was a death sentence. About 3 months before the dinner, he took himself off all life support systems because he just couldn't take the agony of it anymore. He was told that if he lived until the dinner, he could present the award to Ali. He put himself back on the life support systems. The night of the dinner, he looked immaculate in a tuxedo. His 12-year-old son wheeled him onto the stage in a wheelchair. He didn't have the strength to speak or to lift the trophy to give to Ali, but he just looked up at Ali and he said, "I love you." And Ali leaned over and kissed him.
Really?
And, you know, I've seen a lot of games.
Everybody
like
cried.
That.
Everybody cried.
I mean, you know, it's unbelievable. And he just does that. He does the right thing at the right time, always.
Dick, I always contended that Joe Louis got knocked around in his head a lot. Joe, you probably knew Joe. He was a very humorous guy, a very funny guy. He had a lot of wives in every town. He had a lot of kids in every town, but he was funny. And somehow I think when they get punched in the head, it really affects them. I don't know about Ali, but I know about Joe Louis.
Oh, I certainly think so. I did not know Joe in his younger days. I only knew him in the sad older days when he was at Caesar's Palace.
Yeah.
Things like that. I covered his funeral. I got to know his son, Joe Barrow, a little bit. You know, and it certainly had to have taken a toll on Ali. I mean, I see it quite clearly in Floyd Patterson, who was the first professional athlete I ever knew who was younger than I. He was 3 months younger when we met. And Floyd now is 66, as I am, and he has, you know, lots of trouble remembering things, and there's no question that the boxing did it. It's a dreadful, dreadful sport, practiced quite often by lovely people.
It's fascinating. It shows the bad character of the human. I mean, people want to see other people beaten up. I mean, it's
It's a
terrible.
horror.
You go out to Vegas, they get the best seats, they have all this lineup, and it's really a sickening thing if you think about it. But it goes back to Rome.
Yeah,
I mean,
and probably before Rome too. The thing about it is that it has inspired more great literature than any other sport, but I still don't think that compensates for the brutality of it.
All right, did you ever vote for Charlie Ward as Heisman?
You know, I can't remember whether I voted for Charlie, and I probably did because I always voted for offbeat
Who was the
candidates.
best football player that you have known in the last 50 years?
In the last 50 years, Jim Brown. Yeah,
Jimmy Brown, yeah.
We were in high school together. I mean, at the same time on Long Island, and then I played against him in college, but fortunately not in football, in lacrosse. But he was even better in lacrosse than he was in football.
Really?
Yeah, and that was his best game. And it's funny, we played against each other only once in college. He was playing for Syracuse, I was playing for Cornell. He took 7 shots at me, I was the goalie. 4 of the shots went in, and the other 3 just hit me and bounced off. So recently, ESPN Classic did a documentary based on my book, and they interviewed Jim Brown and began asking him about the game. And he started laughing. He said, you know, he says, Dick wasn't really very well known then. He says, I had no idea he was the goalie. I don't remember anything about the game. So I told the producer, I said, look, you got to understand something. That game was the highlight of my athletic career, not of his.
You know, I was down in Florida the other day, and I was speaking to the people from Kutcher's family, which has the resort hotel, and they were very, very close to Wilt Chamberlain.
Very.
And Wilt died at a very young age, and the amount of money he made as compared to these guys today was minuscule. It was absolutely zero.
But he was a good businessman, and he made a lot of money in the real estate business, and he managed his money quite well, and he lived, as you know, very nicely up on the hills in Bel Air. Wilt was a fascinating person. He had been a bellboy at Kutcher's, the world's only 7'1" bellboy at the time. And
you know the question I asked them? They're good friends of mine. Did you bring in an extra bed? How do these guys sleep?
They always get asked that.
How do they sleep, these guys?
Well, they usually do get extra bed. At least, obviously, they do at home. They don't always get them.
No,
in
but when they
hotels.
travel on the road, let's take the Knicks or anybody, any basketball team, do they get in the hotel when they check in? Do they get a special type of bed for these guys?
Well, I think they can sleep diagonally on a king-size bed.
I mean, they have to, but isn't it a terrible way of living?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's the same thing in airplanes. I mean, the worst thing I was once flying, and I sat behind Andre the Giant, and the wrestler. And Andre the Giant had 2 first-class seats. And he was, he was a very sweet, gentle man who was telling how tough it is to be a giant. And he said, wherever he goes, anywhere in the world, he has to carry his own toilet seat with him. Because if he sat on a normal one, it would crack.
It's true. These are real.
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy being a giant.
It's not easy.
No.
And 2 seats don't even do it. Theater, that's a real, you cross over from Heisman to, that's fascinating.
Well,
really.
I've always crossed. I covered the civil rights murders in Mississippi. I covered the riots in Watts. I covered Nixon in 1968. I covered Bobby Kennedy in 67. I covered Lindsay in 65. I was very close to Lenny Bruce, and I did his obituary for Playboy. So there's always been this crossover. Now the theater, it's sort of like almost, I mean, it's not always comic, but it's sort of like comic relief for me. It's such a pleasure to go to the theater. Even the bad plays I like. You were covering Kennedy. What did you think of Bobby Kennedy? I liked him immensely. I thought he had tremendous potential for good. That of all the politicians I've known, which spans about 5, 6 presidents and a bunch of senators and governors and all that, I thought he had the most potential, which obviously never came to fruition. I thought he really honestly cared about people less advantaged than he, which meant everybody in the world.
Had Nixon not been a crook, couldn't he have gone down as a really great president? He was a strategic thinker.
He did some very, very good things. The first time I ever met him, when he was, I think it was in 68, Herb Klein was his press secretary.
Right.
And Herb Klein said to me, have you met the vice president yet? And I said, no, I haven't. He said, you'll like him. He reads the sports pages first. And all I could think was, I don't want a president who reads the sports pages first. And then when Nixon got into the White House, the American Booksellers Association offered him 250 volumes as for his personal library, whatever he wanted. And of the 250 volumes, I was the only author who was represented by 4. I was one ahead of Bruce Catton, and that made me nervous too.
Well, Nixon, I can tell you one thing. He saved Israel in 1973. That is a firm fact, no matter what they tell you. Henry Kissinger was, they weren't getting the arms, and it was very, very tricky. I worked on that problem, and James Schlesinger was Secretary of Defense, was pushing, and he went right to Nixon, because Kissinger was trying to set it up for later so that they would come to a peace process. Have you met Kissinger, by the way?
Yeah, occasionally I certainly.
You didn't write about him. You didn't write about him.
He's not one of the 531 names. The only reason I know there were 531 names in the book is that a reporter for the New York Times counted them. The New York Times wouldn't lie about something like that.
Not on Tuesdays, anyway.
I had 2 interesting experiences with Nixon. One was when I was covering the Oregon primary, and we flew from New York out to Oregon. And in those days, the press corps wasn't like it is today. It wasn't quite the zoo that it is. And each of us got 20 minutes alone with him on the plane going out. And when I sat down and talked to him, I had just written a best-selling sports book called Instant Replay, which he knew. And when I sat down and talked about politics and world affairs and stuff, he phrased everything in sports terms so that I would understand. He talked about hitting a home run, getting to first base. And I wanted to say, Mr. Vice President,
metaphors,
you can use a polysyllabic word or a multisyllabic word, and I'll be able to handle it. But no, he was just trying to educate me. Now, flash forward about 20 years, the last time I ever saw him was in a very nice New York restaurant after Watergate. He walks in with another gentleman, and he comes right by my table, and I stood up, and it was the first time I'd seen him since Watergate. I said, "Hello, Mr. President." And he said, "Dick, you know Admiral Rickover, don't you?" And I said, "Well, I've never met him." And this was quintessential Nixon. He looks at me and says, "He's the father of the nuclear navy." And I wanted to say, well, that's the part I know.
Jimmy Carter worked for him. Do you know that?
Worked for Rickover, oh, sure.
He worked for Rickover.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who worked for Rickover. None came away.
He was very stern.
Scars.
He was a very stern guy, Rickover, but he did a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Your actors and actresses, who's the top of the list for you on actors and actresses?
Right now, I think Mary Louise Parker in Proof is the best performance by an actress in New York that I've seen in ages and ages. I just think she's sensational.
You know what I think is fascinating? I happen to know him very well. Is Jack Lemmon. I think he's a phenomenal actor.
Oh, no question.
He's a Harvard guy, and he's just a great actor. Mm-hmm. I was in Israel with him, and all he wanted to do was get a beret from the Israeli army. So I call up my friend, the defenseman. I said, "Can I come through here with Jack Lemmon?" He said, "Sure, why not?" And to get through the barricades and everything, and they introduced, and he says, "Mr. Minister, all I want is a beret."
Were you able to find him a bookmaker in Israel? Because if Jack couldn't, he probably wasn't. And he's got to miss Walter Matthau a lot, who was also a great actor.
Those two were great, weren't they?
Yeah, and they were two.
And your friend Tony Randall?
Yep. Still
producing children?
He's remarkable.
That's not bad, right?
Yeah. And still taking the New York City public buses.
If John Kennedy had lived, would the world be different today?
I don't know. I mean, I didn't know him. The only time I ever saw him was at Phil Graham's funeral back in the Newsweek days. I was more impressed by his brother, by Bobby, and I just thought that I thought there was more substance to Bobby, more style to JFK.
Really?
But again, I didn't know him, so it's really not fair.
Well, you played golf with Bill Clinton.
Yes, that's not necessarily a measure of a man, but we did play golf together.
How was it?
It was fun. I mean, it was great fun. For one thing, there are about 4 carts with Secret Service guys, so whenever you need a phone, you can get one real easy. And
how'd you get to that? By the way, he invited you?
Yeah, I used to go to the Renaissance weekend each year down in Hilton Head.
New Year's Day or something.
Right.
New Year's weekend.
New Year's weekend, and one night he was looking for a golf partner for the next day, and my wife lied and said I was a golfer, which it was exaggerating, but I do play golf. And so next thing I know, a Secret Service man came over and said, "Would you like to play golf with the president tomorrow?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And we teed off at 8 o'clock in the morning on New Year's morning. And even at that time, he drew a pretty good gallery. But he's got the potential to be a very good golfer, and he's great company. I mean, he just oozes charm no matter where he is. Well, maybe not, no matter
What do you think happened to him now? Did he lose it?
Wow, I mean, everything seems that could go wrong seems to be going wrong. It's just bizarre because he's always been so good at juggling, and now he seems to be dropping every ball. And
Do you know Hillary too, Dick?
just meeting her through, and she's, I mean, I heard her speak at Renaissance several times, and she's a very, very bright person. There's no question.
Who's the best journalist you ever met?
I'm
you.
prejudiced. No,
Other than
I'm
you.
prejudiced. I mean, my buddy Breslin.
Jimmy?
I got to put Jimmy
He
first.
lost a lot of weight.
Yeah, he lost a lot of weight, but he's in his 70s now, but he still does the same amount of work that he always did for a story. Again, in that documentary that we did based on my book, he's a major part of it, as so is Tom Wolfe. But there's one point where Breslin says, the secret to being a reporter is feet. You gotta have feet. He says, because you gotta walk up to the 5th and 6th floor. Nothing important ever happens on the 1st or 2nd floor. And he's right. And I mean, he's a warped genius.
Is he writing where, for Newsday?
He writes for Newsday. He's just finished 2 novels that'll be coming out within the next 6 to 8 months. One, a novel based on a crime boss who liked to go around in his pajamas, and the other one, a novel about an illegal Mexican immigrant worker who dies in a building accident in Brooklyn.
How about Pete Hamill?
Oh, I admire Pete greatly, but I've always thought that
Was
Pete,
he trying to emulate Breslin?
Yeah, I thought so. Certainly from the beginning he was. Later on, as Peter got better, there were certain things that he could do that perhaps Jimmy couldn't do as well. But he was certainly a member of the Breslin school as opposed to Breslin being a member of the Hamill school.
All right, Dick, what's going on in television today? You're all over the place with ESPN and sports and more sports and all that stuff. Is anybody watching this stuff?
Yeah, I think they are. I mean, that's probably the frightening part, is that they are watching it much more than. I mean, it's also splintered now with you can have 150 channels coming into your house, so no one phase of it is watched as much as it used to be. But yeah, I mean, I as far as I can tell, people are watching it. I'm not sure that I like what they're watching.
Well, you've done interesting things. You've written. Been a print journalist, which is really important. I think you have to think very strongly when you write. And you've done television. Which has more impact, in your opinion?
The best job I ever had was being a columnist for the New York Herald Tribune. There's no question about that. I could write a column, and an hour later I'd be in the subway and watch people reading it and reacting to it.
Gave you a reaction?
You couldn't beat that. And the daily deadline. I love a deadline. I love stress. I love to be under pressure. If you give me time to relax, I don't know what to do. I really get upset when I have to relax.
But that's the mark of a good journalist, by the way.
Well, I'll take it. But that next to that, the greatest feeling is when you write the last word of a book, because every book is a debilitating experience.
I've written a few books, and it's a birth. Every book is a birth.
It is.
It's exactly like I never gave birth, but I have twins, but it feels like a birth.
It is, and
You know who else I represented? People don't talk as much about Jackie Robinson.
Well, as a matter of fact, I'm just going to give an award to Rachel sometime soon. I forget where exactly, but
I
she's a
represented him
wonderful
after
lady.
his career when he was
with
doing
Chock full of
Chock
Nuts.
full of Nuts and doing other things. He was a wonderful guy. You don't hear that much about him. And
I met him when he was still a player, but I got to know him better when he was a businessman. There's one thing I always kid his wife about, though. In 1960, I went down to Louisville to see young Cassius Clay, who had just come home from the Olympics. And I took him to a Nixon rally at which John Sherman Cooper and the other...
senators from Kentucky?
Yeah, the 2 senators were there. The one with a strange name, I forget. But anyway, Jackie was on the dais speaking on behalf of Nixon. Of course, Jackie was very close to Rockefeller, but at this time he was speaking for Nixon. And I always kid Rachel Robinson about that, and she says it was a temporary aberration.
We're running out of time. We've got to bring you back, Dick. You're a pleasure, and you've got a plethora of anecdotes and history in you. It's everybody has to look at a book like this and really know what's going on in the world, and he's seen everybody firsthand. Last question, is there gambling in sports?
I bet there isn't.
Dick, thanks for coming on. A pleasure.
In modern Middle East history, only one peace treaty has stood the test of time, the 1978 Camp David Accord. In the new documentary film, Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace, learn the true story behind the greatest diplomatic achievement of our time and its lessons for the future.
the price of peace is very high to have this courageous man and my close friend killed.
Winner of the Telly Award for Best Cultural Program. Now available at select stores including Barnes & Noble and online at Amazon.com. Now get the book the hit movie was based on, Leon Charney's Backdoor Channels. Learn about the backdoor channel negotiations that led to the historic 1978 Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty. Become a witness to history and order Backdoor Channels online at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Also available at all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at iTunes or Audible.com. Relive history. Order Backdoor Channels. Get best-selling author Leon Charney's latest book, The Battle of the Two Talmuds. Join Charney as he explores years of Jewish history to find out why and how Talmudic scholars and rabbis abandoned the Holy Land for the lands of the diaspora. Learn about the power struggles behind the creation of the Jerusalem and Babylonian Talmuds. It's a book critics call engaging and enlightening. A book which will be of interest to people of every faith. Now available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, or download the audiobook of The Battle of the Two Talmuds at iTunes or Audible.com. Leon Charney sets out to discover the true meaning of the Kaddish, the Jewish custom of reciting a prayer to commemorate the death of a close relative. Join Charney as he finds out the history of the Kaddish and how it has evolved. Reviewed as a refreshing walk through Jewish history and a book that deserves to be read by both Jews and non-Jews, The Mystery of the Kaddish is now available online at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at Audible.com or on iTunes. Discover The Mystery of the Kaddish. Available now over iTunes, Amazon, and Google Play. Leon Charney's cantorial CD and Disco Lam. Listen as Charney movingly sings El Mole Rachamim and Charney's amazing rendition of a disco remix of Adon Olam, all sung in the incredible and individual Charney style. Also listen to the CDs on Rhapsody. Download Leon Charney's cantorial songs and Disco Lam, the disco remix of Adon Olam on Amazon, iTunes, and Google Play. Or listen in on Rhapsody. All available now. Now, here's Leon Charney's interview with legendary sportscaster Bill Mazer.
We're back. I'm Leon Charney. We're talking with the legendary Bill Mazer, who, how many years were you on WEVD, Bill? Your talk show? How many years? Were you on EVD?
How many years did I do the talk show at EVD?
Right.
9 years.
How long have you been in the sports business and the television business?
You sound like the guy from the New York Times.
Which one?
A guy by the name of Richard Sandomir.
Is that right?
Called me up. How old are you? I said, it's none of your business.
No,
I said, why do you want to know how old I am? He said, because in the story, whenever you mention a name, it's comma and age. I said, work and see how old I am. So he came up with a document that was at my voting place in Scarsdale. And you know what it said? I was born November 2nd, 1964.
Good for you.
So I'm just 38 years old.
And your
I don't know how they, no, I'm serious, they really did. How long have I worked in the business? I began as a sports announcer in true fashion. By that I mean I got paid money in 1948.
Wow.
In Buffalo, New York. And I worked there for 16 years. And then I came to New York City and began what was a new program in America, a sports talk show. And that lasted for 4.5 years. And, you know, the rest is a...
Are you the only yeshiva boy who went into broadcasting?
I think so. Yeah.
And was that, were you heralded for that? People really acknowledge you for that? Because you're a whiz in sports. Everybody knows it. You got an unbelievable memory.
Not ESPN. They haven't found out yet.
Really?
Look, you said that I go to yeshiva. I think that anybody who went to yeshiva had to have one trait.
He had to be Jewish.
I forgot about that. No, the trait that you had to have was a good memory. Because if you didn't have a good memory, you couldn't go to school there. I lived in Brooklyn. I had to get up every morning to do my prayers. Then I took a train at 7:15 to go up to 186th Street and Amsterdam Avenue, which is where the yeshiva was. Then we began the Hebrew studies, which lasted till 2:30 in the afternoon. Then there was a quick break, I mean quick, and before you knew it, you were taking your English courses. Now, by the time I got through, it must have been about 6:45. So I take the train back home. Where was I going to study? So either you had a good memory or you just didn't stay there. But you know, the guys that I went to school with all had good memories. It was embarrassing, for example, when the time came for midday prayer, for anybody to open up the Siddur, which is the
prayer book. Right.
I mean, the guys would have laughed at you.
How did you get into broadcasting? It's not, it's unusual.
How did I get into broadcasting? I was a student at the University of Michigan, and I was a pre-medic. In order to leave the yeshiva, which I did, I promised my folks I'd become a doctor. Okay?
Could have been worse. Could have been a lawyer.
So I went to the University of Michigan, and I decided after I was accepted at the University of Tennessee Medical School that I didn't want to go to med school. Period. Long story shortened. I just didn't want to go. So my father said, at least, you know, finish school. Well, in my final year, among the courses that I took was a course in speech. And it turned out to be a course in radio. I got up in front of the class one day. Everybody had to make kind of a speech. And I made this talk, and I mentioned Long Island. And then the big laughter, and I said, what was so funny about what I said? One of the kids said, Long Island. I said, isn't that the name of it? He said, no, it's Long Island. Oh, I said, really? Is it Long Island? Yes. That led me to a kind of a nothing job because the war broke out. And all of a sudden, I did my duty, as every one of the kids of my age did, and I went over into the service. And then when I came back, I thought to myself, you know, I like that idea of broadcasting. So I worked in New York for a cup of coffee, and then Marty Glickman, may his soul rest in peace.
He's a good friend of mine. I know him very well.
He recommended me for a job in Buffalo. There was a job in Anchorage, Alaska, but he didn't think I would go there.
Not a good shul there.
No. So at any rate, that's the story. I mean,
great story.
I went up there. I worked there for 16 years. And then a guy named Mike Joseph, who was a radio doctor, recommended me to NBC. And that's started me off.
All right, I've been on your show many, many times.
Yes.
And you have a tremendous interest in Israel and the whole Middle East. And you're one of the staunchest broadcasters on Jewish affairs probably in the country. And you're very strong in your feelings about it. Are you very worried about what's going on today?
Oh, of course. Listen, Leon, when I came back from overseas, I had never heard of 6 million Jews being killed.
Really?
It seemed incredible to me. And yes, I became a sports announcer. But you have to understand, I wasn't born in this country.
Really?
I was born in the Scarsdale of Russia, a little town called Zaslav.
Oh.
And the reason we left was that there was a pogrom in the town. And somebody went after my mother, and my father knew very little about that kind of joke because he had been a cavalryman. I give you my word. Matter of fact, when I saw him ride a horse, I thought he was Tom Mix. He shot the guy. We left. We came to this country. And, you know, I heard the usual, why did I kill Jesus? I didn't even know who Jesus was. I was 7 years old. I asked my mother, and she told me about it. Then she called Tommy Barron's mother and said, is this what you teach Tommy at home? That kind of incident was not the seminal incident. Seminal incidents occurred when I went to Michigan, and I used to hear Father Coughlin. Do you remember Father Coughlin? A little before your time.
Before me, but he was
I'm a lot younger than that.
anti-Semitic priest.
Yeah, he was a priest in Detroit, Michigan. So that kind of roused my passions, but the thing that finally culminated was the idea of the killing of Jews, the Holocaust. I try to explain to people, I'm not sure that it always gets across, that what this has to do with is the big lie. And by the way, I heard you talking with Ed. There is no question. I used to say, you know, somebody asked God, when will there be peace in the Middle East? And he said, not in my time. He was wrong. There will be peace in the Middle East. You know when? When the Arabs run out of fossil fuel. When there is no more oil, they will have nothing to back on. But the big lie spread by the Arabs. There never was a temple in Jerusalem? Well, if there was no temple in Jerusalem, there was never a Jesus Christ. There couldn't have been. Because he went to the temple, didn't he? After the money changers.
There are many people doing studies about Jesus and his Judaism in the time that he lived. And it's really fascinating because they track how the worship was in his day. I don't know how they do that exactly. But Jesus obviously was a bona fide and an excellent Jew, and there's no question about it in the history of the world.
Listen, I'm going to recommend a guy to you. His name is David Berger. I told Arnie to recommend him to you. David Berger is a classical scholar on that period. And there have been works done about that particular time. But, you know, I used to talk about a book written by James Carroll called Constantine's Sword.
We spoke about it on the radio, you and I, Constantine's
But
Sword.
as far as what's going on now, I noticed that Arik Sharon was in Moscow meeting with Putin.
Right.
And he said afterwards, they never talked about the Palestinians because he thinks the greatest threat to Israel is Iran.
Right. He's right. He's right.
He made that speak.
Nuclear weapons.
What do you think about it? Listen, I ask you those questions all the time. What do you think about that? What do you think about... You were there when they made a peace. What do you think?
I think Iran is a very, very dangerous mortal enemy of Israel, that they have the ability and capacity to throw nuclear stuff around at Israel. I think Israel is very aware of it, and what Sharon is trying to do is to stop Russia from selling him. They're selling him a lot of nuclear energy and nuclear arms, and that's a big, big problem for Israel, and that's why Sharon is over there.
Why, you know, the thing that is strange about the actions of the Palestinians is that, after all, they have a long history with Jews, the Arabs do, and yet there was never the kind of anti-Semitism that there was in Europe. Suddenly, Arafat, through his lineage, his uncle, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, has brought European anti-Semitism into the picture.
Well, I just said that to Koch. It's coming into it's coming into vogue again in Europe, and people who are not only Jews, but everybody has to watch that. I think it's very dangerous, and I think it's been proven. The effect of it is in Durban, in South Africa, when, as I said before, when the other European nations didn't walk out. I mean, this was a racist conference against Jews. This was totally against Israel and Jews, and very severe. And I agree with Koch, by the way, that Powell and Bush should be commended for the fact that
Bush
they walked out.
There's no doubt about that. But explain this to me. If you had to go to a PR firm, for whatever reason,
right,
who would you go to?
Probably
in New York.
Probably Rubenstein.
Isn't his name Aziz Azazabu? His name is Rubenstein, right?
Right.
Jewish man?
Right.
How did the Jews lose the war when it comes to PR to the Arabs?
This is something I don't know.
Come on, why?
I don't know. I don't know.
That's one of the absolutely imponderables to me.
But I'm not sure, by the way. I think the American public is very much behind Israel.
I think they are.
If you poll the American public, I think they are behind Israel. I think what goes on in Israel, unfortunately, there's a lot of, I don't know, they just had an election for the leader of the Labor Party. And there's a fight that's going on that's unbelievable between Fuad, that I predicted might win, and the Borg, who was on the show about 6 weeks ago. Jews like to think that they can lead, you know, the old story about Golda Meir is that every Jew's a president, and every place you go to, that's why I think it had a problem in Anchorage. There weren't be enough shuls for the Jews, you know. That's why you wound up in Buffalo. But you know, by the way, did you ever face anti-Semitism in your career? I know many anti-Semitism in your career. Were you biased against because you were Jewish?
Not really. Not to my knowledge, except once that I know of. Red Barber left the Dodgers to go to the Yankees. And there was an opening with the Dodgers. Now, you'd have to understand that when I was a kid, they were my team, the Dodgers. The advertising agency, Batten, Barton, Durston, and Osborne. Mr. Osborne was a Buffalonian who really liked me. And he told the guys at BBD&O, hire Mazer. So, Jesus. Why do I remember those things? Because they hurt. So what happened was, I met with the guys at BBD&O. They liked me, and they sent me out to meet Walter O'Malley, president of the boat. Everything was going great. He suddenly says to me, out of a boat, "What is Mazer?" I said to him, "I don't know what you're asking me. I mean, people always call me and say, is Mazer your real name?" And I tell them, no, my real name is Rockefeller. But we changed it. And I would have told him that if I had a gut in my body, but I didn't. I said to him, are you asking me where my people came from or what my religion is? He said, both. Oh. I said, well, my people came from Russia and I'm Jewish. And he said to me, you know, Jewish people are very critical of their own. And instead of laughing, which I should have said, you know, you're damn right. They're like the Irish.
Right.
You get two Irish in a bar, and they'll fight over anything. I didn't say anything. Needless to say, I didn't get the job. But
we never know. All right, I got to hold for a break. You know all about that. You hold me many times on the radio for a podiatrist, a doctor, an eye doctor, who knows what. So we got to hold for a break, and we'll come right back with the legendary Bill Mazer, who has just has finished 9 years on WEVD, and probably will announce very shortly that he's going to be on the radio again. So all you people who are writing to him, keep writing. He likes it. We'll be right back.
In modern Middle East history, only one peace treaty has stood the test of time, the 1978 Camp David Accord. In the new documentary film, Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace, learn the true story behind the greatest diplomatic achievement of our time and its lessons for the future.
The price of peace is very high to have this courageous man and my close friend killed.
Winner of the Telly Award for Best Cultural Program. Now available at select stores including Barnes & Noble and online at Amazon.com. Now get the book the hit movie was based on, Leon Charney's Backdoor Channels. Learn about the Backdoor Channel negotiations that led to the historic 1978 Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty. Become a witness to history and order Backdoor Channels online at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Also available at all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at iTunes or Audible.com. Relive history. Order Backdoor Channels. Get best-selling author Leon Charney's latest book, The Battle of the Two Talmuds. Join Charney as he explores years of Jewish history to find out why and how Talmudic scholars and rabbis abandoned the Holy Land for the lands of the diaspora. Learn about the power struggles behind the creation of the Jerusalem and Babylonian Talmuds. It's a book critics call engaging and enlightening. A book which will be of interest to people of every faith. Now available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, or download the audiobook of The Battle of the Two Talmuds at iTunes or Audible.com. Leon Charney sets out to discover the true meaning of the Kaddish, the Jewish custom of reciting a prayer to commemorate the death of a close relative. Join Charney as he finds out the history of the Kaddish and how it has evolved. Reviewed as a refreshing walk through Jewish history and a book that deserves to be read by both Jews and non-Jews, The Mystery of the Kaddish is now available online at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at audible.com or on iTunes. Discover The Mystery of the Kaddish. Available now over iTunes, Amazon, and Google Play. Leon Charney's cantorial CD in Disco Lam. Listen as Charney movingly sings El Mole Rachamim and Charney's amazing rendition of a disco remix of Adon Olam, all sung in the incredible and individual Charney style. Also listen to the CDs on Rhapsody. Download Leon Charney's cantorial songs in Disco Lam, the disco remix of Adon Olam on Amazon, iTunes, and Google Play. Or listen in on Rhapsody. All available now.
We're back. We're talking with Bill Mazer, who's making a rare appearance on television, at least on this show. I've asked him about 10 years to come on, and he finally came on. You know him from EVD. You know him as a legend in sports. You know him for a lot of his staunch support for Israel and his Judaism. And it's always a pleasure to meet a guy like Bill, who's not shameful. He's been in the public arena for a long time. Bill, Yasser Arafat, you've heard a lot of talk about this guy. What do you think the end result will be? Con man?
Oh, yeah. You know, I interviewed Hillary Clinton. I may have been the first guy on radio to interview her. And I like her. I have to admit that to you. I like her a great deal. I know that some of my Jewish friends don't. And I say to them, or said to them, really, as you said to me one day about Jimmy Carter. Well, a lot of Jews don't like Jimmy Carter. They think he's anti-Semitic. You say no.
Right. I say no.
But I said to Hillary, I said, what bothers me terribly is that here's somebody like Yasser Arafat. Now, everybody's willing to forget that his terrorism, as evil as it was. But do you know what he says in Arabic to his people? Do you have any idea? No. I said, did you see the piece in the New York Times? And she had. Piece in the New York Times about what they teach kids. And she said, that's awful. Now, when a guy named Woodlansky was on the air with me, he works for the Israeli government, he has done a job of taking Arafat's speeches and translating them, lower thirds, you know, like in a movie.
Right.
Foreign movie.
Subtitle.
Absolutely. I wish I could speak English well.
We'll send you
Here's
back
a
to school.
situation.
You should be a doctor, you know?
That's right.
Change careers.
How does he get it? Look, you've been in politics. I never have. I watched Ed talk to you just before, and I give you my word. I said this to him one day. I said, you're going to be the first Jewish president of the United States. And he started to laugh. But it's the strangest thing about slip betwixt the lip and the cup. What happened after that, I don't know. I can't tell you what there is about politicians that sometimes strike people off and what it is that makes them really tick. So when it comes to politics, I'm the worst guy. I've interviewed every one of the candidates. Ferrer, except for Bloomberg. I interviewed Ferrer. Of course, I've interviewed Mark Green many times, Alan Hevesy, and Peter Vallone. They're all great on radio. Hevesy, I thought, my God, look at the guy's credentials. College professor, speaks beautifully, has a seeming cosmopolitan flair. Mark Green, who probably will get more votes than Freddie Ferrer in the black community. You hear somebody like Ed do a job as if almost they were cadavers. You know.
Well, he's for Vallone, and he admits it, so he was really pushing for Peter Vallone, and he's a very outspoken man, as you know and I know, so you hear dramatic statements from Ed Koch. But
what is there about Vallone that's negative?
I think Peter Vallone's a fine man. No, I don't see it.
But
No,
what?
he's
No charisma?
No, you mean why is he not ahead of the game?
Yeah.
It seems to be that that he doesn't have what people call charisma. I mean, I know Vallone very well. He's a nice man. He does have charisma. Some people don't show it in a public way.
The other day, did you see the piece Joyce Pernick wrote?
No.
About Green?
No.
She cut him.
Really?
And it's the strangest thing in the world.
New York Times, Joyce
Yes.
Pernick, right.
She used to be the Metro editor. She wrote a piece and said he's just too smart. He comes off as a smartass. Now you ask yourself, would she have said that about Soloveitchik? I mean...
Rabbi Soloveitchik was a Talmudic scholar who taught at Yeshiva University and was
maybe the greatest scholar in the 20th century.
One of the greatest of the 20th century. And very liberal, by the way.
I know. But, I mean, would you have said, well, I guess the truism in all of this is you don't really have to be honest. You just have to look honest.
Perception is greater than
key
substance,
word.
right?
Absolutely.
Which is easier, Bill, radio or television? And
I like them both.
Really?
Yeah.
You have to be a little more on for television?
I'm on the air with you right now. Do I seem to be on?
No.
Okay. Now, in 1947, I took an audition at Dumont. And I found out one thing. I'm looking directly at the camera, but I never talk to the camera. Everybody says, you got to talk to the camera.
No, you talk to me.
No, I talk through the camera. I talk through the camera so that I can see the audience back of the picture. Now you will say, cuckoo. But I've never found any difference between the two. The only difference is, for me, I'm older, but I still have a very young voice. But the camera doesn't lie. I'm older. And the worst thing in the world, in this business, is to be older. Older. Although, you know what a guy told me yesterday? Honestly. Why did I say honestly? Have I been lying up to now?
No, I don't know why you said it.
I said it because, for emphasis. A guy said to me yesterday, a guy in the business, when I said to him, you know, this age business, he said, you know, you reach a point in the business where being old has no meaning for guys like you.
That's
and
great.
I said to him, are you serious? He said, yes. But as far as the technique, how would you like it if I... Well, of course, you know that this afternoon I met with Ed Koch as he was standing there, and well, you don't do that.
That's
Talk
not
the
our
same
show.
as you do.
No.
But you do that. Are you self-conscious in front of a camera?
No, I've been doing this for 13 years. I'm not self-conscious at all.
It's that simple.
Maybe it's my yeshiva background also. I should have been a doctor.
Did you go to yeshiva?
I went to Yeshiva University. I went further than you did. You went to the high school. I went to the college.
Well, you know why they let me go at the yeshiva? Because they found a sports book in the Gemara.
Is that
I was
right? Is that a
reading.
true story?
Yeah, no. No. You see, you went to yeshiva.
I thought they found baseball players on your tzitzis, you know?
No, the fact is that what happened was I started the yeshiva when I was 12 years old. I graduated when I was 16. And
High school.
Yes.
Right.
And in that period of time, going to school from really basically 7:30 in the morning till 6:30 at night just wore my butt down.
I know the drill, and after that, I was a basketball player, so I played basketball.
Did you at the yeshiva?
Yeah, we went to practice. I played for a guy named Red Sarachek.
I know Red.
Red Sarachek. As a freshman, I played. We had a very good team that year, by the way.
Obviously, you were the Jewish Bob Cousy.
You're right. I couldn't score, but I was a great passer. You're absolutely right. And they gave me some money to play basketball.
By the way, how did you get started in this?
In television, it was an era. We had some people who promoted the idea of maybe having a Middle East show, you know, talking about the Middle East, and they said that the budget would be X and the profits would be Y, and what happened was the profits were Y, and it was a reverse. And they thought they had me by the canolas, as you say, and they said, look, you got to go on. You've got a 2-year contract. I said, well, you know, I was an honor student at Columbia School of Journalism for a period. You know, maybe I'll try the television myself. And what happened is I went on, and then we were very successful.
Enjoy it.
And we're successful at it. We have a great audience, a little bit similar to yours, but very staunch and very dedicated. And your friend Sam Lefrakis, Ron Perlman, Daniela, I mean everybody, they watch the show. You're going to be surprised at how many people say they saw you on our show. And we think we're doing a public service, too, because we're illuminating people about really what's happening in the Middle East, and I think it's very important.
Let me tell you this. Do we have enough time, guys?
Yes.
Clyde Haberman had a piece in the New York Times.
Right.
And his piece discussed the fact that this Jewish lady doctor, excuse me.
Arab doctor. I read the piece.
You remember the piece?
Right.
Arab lady doctor.
Right.
Was distressed because
she couldn't
of the
get to her
time
job,
and
right.
all of that. It infuriated me. I called Joe Lilyville. Until yesterday, ran the New York Times, executive editor.
Right.
And he said, was there anything in the article that was untrue? I said, how would I know? But knowing Haberman from what I've heard about him, no, it probably isn't untrue. Then he said, what is your complaint? I said, my complaint is that at the present time, in that region, you're talking about a situation that is uncomfortable for people, for a time bit, like coming into New York's Kennedy Airport. Why do I have to stand in line with customs? And now they're going to open up my bag? And they're going to look through this, and they're going to take this time, and I got a guy waiting out there, I'm paying him for time and overtime and all that kind of stuff. I said, is that a big deal? Let me tell you what's a bigger deal. How would you like to be walking down the street and see there's a pizzeria that is open, and you walk in there just as they blow a bomb? You think that guy was concerned about time?
So what did he say? The editor
didn't say anything.
Really?
That was the end of the conversation.
Maybe that's
it was the end of the conversation. That particular situation, if people don't understand the difference between inconvenience and life and death, they shouldn't be in a position to be writing about it. That's my personal opinion.
That's the last word. We've had Bill Mazer. Don't forget. He'll be